In the heart of a noisy town, Aisha and Tund were once known as a happy couple. They laughed together, shared dreams, and everyone thought their love would last forever. But as time passed, Tund began to change. He started spending more time outside, staying late with his friends and coming home smelling of alcohol. The warmth that once filled their home slowly faded away, replaced by silence and tension. Aisha was a gentle woman with a kind smile. She was expecting their first child and wanted peace more than anything. She tried her best to keep their home together, cooking his favorite meals, greeting him with love, and pretending not to notice when he ignored her. She believed that if she stayed patient, he would remember the man he used to be. One evening, Tund came home with a group of his loud friends. They laughed, played music, and filled the small house with noise. "Aisha, bring food," he shouted, showing off to them. She hurried to the kitchen, even though she was exhausted. Her hands trembled slightly as she carried a tray of food to the table. She smiled politely, serving each man, and tried to hide how tired she was. Her belly was growing, and every step felt heavier than before. The men kept joking, talking about money, cars, and parties. Aisha stood quietly behind them, waiting in case they needed anything else. As she reached for one of the plates, her hand slipped. A small bowl of soup fell to the ground, splashing across the tiled floor. For a moment there was silence. Then Tund's face twisted with anger. "Are you blind?" he shouted. His voice echoed through the house. The laughter from his friends quickly returned, but this time it was cruel. "Your wife can't even hold a bowl," one of them sneered. Aisha bent down quickly, trying to clean the mess, her cheeks burning with shame. "I'm sorry," she whispered softly, her voice trembling. "It was an accident." But Tund's pride was too big to let it go. He stood up, his eyes filled with rage. "You always embarrass me," he shouted again. "You can't even do one thing right." Before Aisha could move, Tund pushed her roughly aside. The force sent her stumbling backward. She fell onto the hard floor, her hands clutching her belly. The room fell silent again, but no one helped her. His friends just looked away awkwardly, unsure of what to say. Aisha's heart raced. Pain shot through her stomach and tears streamed down her face. "Tund," she whispered weakly. But he turned his back and poured himself another drink as if nothing had happened. Her world seemed to stop. The man she once loved had humiliated her in front of others, not caring that she was carrying his child. Slowly she pushed herself up, wiping her tears. She didn't say a word. She just went to her small room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed, holding her belly protectively. Outside she could still hear the laughter and clinking of glasses. Inside her heart was breaking. She whispered to her unborn child, "Don't worry, my baby. Mama will protect you." That night Aisha didn't sleep. She stared out the window, the moonlight touching her tear-streaked face. She thought about the life she once dreamed of, the happy family, the laughter, the love, and how quickly it had turned into pain. When morning came, Tund was gone. The dishes from the night before were still on the table. The house smelled of spilled beer and smoke. Aisha walked slowly around, cleaning up the mess in silence. Every step she took reminded her of the night before. In that quiet moment, she made a decision in her heart. She didn't know how or when, but she would find the strength to stand again. She would protect her baby and herself no matter what. She realized that love was not about staying through pain, it was about having the courage to walk away when you are no longer respected. She took a deep breath and looked at the small blanket she had been knitting for her baby. She smiled faintly, a tear falling onto the fabric. The old Aisha, the one who accepted every insult, was gone. Though the world had turned its back on her, she promised herself that this was not the end of her story. It was only the beginning of her strength. She turned to face the window, tears silently falling onto her pillow. Outside, the moonlight shone through the curtains, making everything look peaceful, everything except her heart. She thought about leaving, but fear stopped her. Where would she go? How would she survive with a baby on the way? Still, deep inside, she knew she couldn't stay in a place that broke her spirit every day. Morning came. Tund woke up grumpy, complaining about his hangover. He didn't notice that Aisha's eyes were red or that her hands shook as she served him breakfast. When she placed the plate in front of him, he muttered something cruel under his breath and left without saying goodbye. The sound of the closing door felt like an ending. Aisha sat down, staring at the half-eaten food. Then slowly she stood up and went to their small bedroom. She looked around, the walls that had witnessed both love and pain, the pictures that once meant happiness. Without another thought, she took a small bag from the corner, folded a few clothes, and tucked in her baby's tiny blanket. She placed a hand over her belly again and whispered, "We are leaving." She stepped out of the house quietly. The morning air was cool, and the road stretched ahead of her like a path to freedom. She didn't look back. Her feet hurt, but she kept walking. Hours passed as she moved from one dusty path to another, guided only by the hope of finding peace. When she finally reached her aunt's village, she was exhausted. Her clothes were dusty, and her legs trembled with every step. But when she saw her Aunt Binta's small house, her heart lifted. Aunt Binta had always been kind, a woman known in the village for her wisdom and warmth. Aisha knocked gently on the wooden door. When her aunt opened it and saw her, she gasped. "Aisha, my child. What happened to you?" Aisha couldn't speak. Tears flowed as she hugged her aunt tightly. "I couldn't stay there anymore," she said between sobs. "He doesn't love me. He hurt me. I had to protect my baby." Aunt Binta held her close and stroked her hair. "You did the right thing," she said softly. "You are safe here, my child. No one will harm you again." For the first time in months, Aisha felt peace. That night, she slept soundly in a small room with a mat and a thin blanket, but it felt warmer than the bed she had left behind. The air smelled of firewood and roasted maize, and she could hear crickets singing outside. It was simple, but it was safe. The next morning, Aisha woke up early and helped her aunt fetch water from the well. The villagers were kind. They smiled at her, asked about her health, and offered help without judgment. Slowly she began to heal. Her aunt introduced her to a local women's group, a small circle of women who worked together to earn a living. They made soap, baked bread, and sold fruits at the market. At first Aisha was shy. She had never done business before. But the women encouraged her and she started learning how to bake. The smell of fresh bread filled the air every morning, and she felt a new sense of purpose growing inside her. Each loaf she sold brought her not just a few coins but hope. Weeks turned into months and Aisha's belly grew rounder. She laughed more often now, her eyes shining again. The women admired her courage and Aunt Binta often said, "You see, my child? Life always finds a way to bloom again." Every evening after a long day of work, Aisha would sit under the mango tree outside her aunt's house, resting her tired feet. She would talk to her unborn baby, telling stories of how strong they both were. "One day," she whispered, "you'll grow up and know that your mother never gave up. Not even when life was hard." Meanwhile, back in town, Tun didn't notice her absence at first. He continued his careless life, drinking with his friends and pretending everything was fine. But slowly, the emptiness in the house began to weigh on him. The laughter was gone, the food was gone, and the warmth that Aisha once brought had vanished. Still, his pride wouldn't let him admit he missed her. In the village, Aisha kept moving forward. Her bread became popular, and people came from nearby areas to buy it. She began earning enough to help her aunt and even save a little for the baby. Every day she thanked God for giving her a second chance at life. The pain of her past still lingered, but it no longer controlled her. She was no longer the broken woman who had cried on the kitchen floor. She was Aisha, the strong, brave woman who had learned to stand on her own. And deep inside, she knew that life was not finished with her yet. Something greater was waiting ahead, something that would change everything once more. Months passed quickly, and the pain Aisha once carried began to fade like a shadow after sunset. When the time came, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The first time she held him, her eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow but of deep joy. She named him Malik, meaning king, because she wanted him to grow up knowing his worth. Malik became the center of her world. Every cry, every smile, every little hand reaching for her gave Aisha strength she never knew she had. Life was not easy, but each morning she woke up with purpose. She baked bread before dawn, kneading the dough with love, and carried baskets to the market with Malik tied gently on her back. The villagers adored her. They would greet her warmly each day. "Aisha, your bread smells so good today. You must teach us how to bake like you." Children often ran after her, laughing as the smell of fresh bread filled the air. Her small stall at the corner of the market soon became one of the busiest. At first she earned only a few coins, but she saved every single one. Her aunt, Binta, often smiled proudly. "You see, my child? You turned your tears into something beautiful." Aisha would laugh softly and reply, "It's Malik who gave me strength." As the months turned into years, Aisha's little bakery began to grow. With the help of the women's group, she bought an oven and built a small shop beside the main road. She painted the wooden sign herself. It read Malik's Bread. People from nearby villages came to buy her bread because it wasn't just delicious, it was made with love. Malik grew up running around the shop, helping his mother carry small baskets and greeting customers with a cheerful smile. "Good morning, Auntie," he would shout to every woman who passed by, his laughter echoing through the marketplace. Everyone adored him and often said, "Aisha, your boy will make you proud one day." At night, after a long day of work, Aisha would sit outside her shop under the soft glow of a lantern. She would watch Malik sleep peacefully and whisper, "You are my miracle, my reason to live." Her heart was content. She had built a new life from nothing, a life filled with peace, respect, and hope. But while Aisha's life blossomed miles away, Tun's world was slowly falling apart. After Aisha left, things began to change for him. At first he didn't care. He thought she would come back just like before. He told his friends, "She'll return. She always does." But weeks passed, then months, and Aisha never returned. The house became quiet, too quiet. The meals were gone, the warmth was gone, and for the first time, Tund realized how empty his life truly was. He continued drinking, spending money to fill the loneliness, but it didn't work. One by one his friends began to disappear. Some moved away, others simply stopped calling. Without Aisha, even his home looked lifeless. Dust gathered on the shelves, dishes piled in the sink, and the laughter that once echoed through the rooms had vanished forever. When his business began to fail, he grew desperate. The same men who had laughed with him at parties now avoided him. "Tund has changed," they whispered. "He's no longer the man he used to be." But in truth he was facing the same pain he had once caused Aisha: humiliation, loneliness, and regret. One morning he woke up and looked at the empty house around him. His eyes fell on a chair where Aisha used to sit. He remembered her quiet smile, her soft voice, and the way she would wait up for him no matter how late he came home. The memories hit him like a heavy wave. He realized too late what he had lost. Tund tried to ask around about her. He went to the market, to the nearby villages, even to her family home, but no one had any answers. "We haven't seen her," people said. "Maybe she moved far away." Days turned into weeks and Tund's hope faded. Without Aisha, his world lost color. The same man who once stood tall and proud was now broken, his shoulders heavy with guilt. He began spending nights alone, replaying that terrible moment when he pushed her, the moment that changed everything. The laughter of his friends that day haunted him in his dreams. Meanwhile, back in her village, Aisha's business flourished. Her small bakery became a safe place for women who wanted to learn and work. She trained others to bake and encouraged them to start their own stalls. "If I can do it, so can you," she often said, smiling. Malik had grown into a bright little boy with curious eyes. He often asked, "Mama, where is my father?" Aisha would pause for a moment and answer gently, "He is far away, my son. But what matters is that you have love right here." She would point to her heart, and Malik would giggle and hug her tightly. Each evening, Aisha thanked God for her second chance at life. The pain of her past had turned into wisdom. She had learned that true strength was not in revenge or anger, but in rebuilding yourself with grace and courage. Her story became an inspiration in the village. People who once pitted her now looked up to her. The woman who had once been pushed to the ground now stood tall, her head high, her heart full of dignity. And somewhere in the distance, Tund wandered from place to place searching, not just for Aisha but for forgiveness. His pride, which once made him cruel, had now become the very thing that destroyed him. But fate had not finished with either of them yet. Their paths would soon cross again, and when that moment came, it would change both their lives forever. The sun was bright that morning as Aisha opened the doors of her bakery. The smell of freshly baked bread and cakes filled the air, drawing people from every corner of the village. Children laughed as they waited for sweet buns, women chatted as they bought loaves for their families, and the workers moved cheerfully around, smiling at their kind and hard-working boss. Aisha had come a long way from the quiet, broken woman who once left her home with nothing but a small bag and a heart full of pain. Now she was respected by everyone who knew her. She treated her workers like family, paying them fairly and teaching them how to manage money. Every morning she reminded them, "Success means nothing if you forget kindness." One afternoon, as she stood by the counter serving customers, a man in a fine suit walked in. He was from a big food company based in the city. "Madam Aisha," he said with a smile, "we've heard a lot about you. Your bread is becoming famous. We'd like to partner with you and supply your products across the region." Aisha was speechless for a moment. She looked around her small shop, the oven she had bought with her savings, the tables made by a local carpenter, and the women who worked beside her every day. Her eyes filled with tears of joy. She clasped her hands and said softly, "Thank you. I never dreamed something like this would happen." News of her success spread quickly. The local newspaper wrote a story about her, calling her the woman who rose from pain to prosperity. Her photo appeared on the front page. Aisha standing proudly in front of her bakery holding a basket of bread, smiling with confidence and peace. That same morning in another part of the town, Tun sat in a small cafe reading a newspaper. His life had changed completely. His business had failed, his friends were gone, and his days were spent searching for small jobs to survive. When he turned the page and saw the headline, his hands froze. There she was, Aisha, his wife, the woman he had once mocked and hurt. He stared at her picture for a long time. Her eyes looked different now, strong, calm, and full of pride. The article described how she had started with nothing, baking bread in a small hut, and had grown into one of the most respected businesswomen in the region. Tun's throat tightened. He felt something heavy inside him, a mix of shame, regret, and disbelief. He whispered to himself, Aisha, how? He couldn't focus on the rest of the article. The words blurred as memories flooded his mind. The night he humiliated her, the way she looked at him before walking out of the house, the sound of her crying. He buried his face in his hands, realizing that the woman he had treated as nothing had become everything he had lost. For days he couldn't stop thinking about her. He wanted to see her, to apologize even if she never forgave him. One morning, with trembling hands, he folded the newspaper, placed it in his bag and set out to find her. It took him hours to travel to the village where her bakery was located. The roads were rough, but his heart beat with determination. When he finally arrived, the air smelled of freshly baked bread. The bakery stood proudly at the corner of the market street. It was bigger than he expected, painted in soft yellow with the words, Malik's Bread, written on a bright blue sign. Tun stood there for a long time, unable to move. He watched as people came and went, laughing and chatting. He saw workers in white aprons carrying trays of bread, their faces full of joy. The sound of music drifted through the open windows. It was not just a bakery, it was a place filled with life. And then he saw her. Aisha stepped out of the doorway holding a tray of warm bread. She wore a simple dress and a white headscarf. Her smile was calm and genuine, her movements graceful and confident. She spoke kindly to a young worker, patted another on the shoulder, and handed a loaf to an old woman who couldn't afford to pay. Tun's eyes stung with tears. This was not the same woman he once knew. This was someone stronger, someone who had found peace without him. He took a deep breath and slowly walked forward. His heart pounded as he approached her. When Aisha finally noticed him, she froze for a moment. Their eyes met, his filled with regret, hers calm but cautious. Tund, she said quietly, her voice steady. He swallowed hard. Aisha, he said softly. You look different. I've changed, she replied simply. He nodded, unable to look her in the eye. I saw your picture in the paper. You've done well for yourself. Aisha didn't respond right away. She looked at him carefully, taking in the tired lines on his face, the sadness in his eyes. Life teaches us in different ways, she finally said. Some lessons are painful, but they make us stronger. Tund lowered his head. I came to say I'm sorry, he said, his voice trembling. For everything I did. I hurt you, Aisha. I hurt the only person who truly cared for me. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed to tell you that. Aisha was quiet for a long time. The bakery around them buzzed with noise, customers talking, ovens whirring, but in that moment the world felt still. Then she spoke softly, Tund, I forgave you long ago. Not for your sake but for mine. Holding on to anger would have kept me trapped in the past. I chose peace instead. Her words hit him deeply. His eyes filled with tears and he nodded slowly. You're stronger than I ever realized, he whispered. She smiled gently. Pain can destroy or build you. I chose to build. At that moment, Malik came running out of the bakery. Mama, look. I helped bake the bread, he shouted happily. Tun's eyes widened as he looked at the boy who resembled him so much. His lips trembled. He's my son? Aisha nodded. Yes. His name is Malik. Tund knelt down, tears streaming down his face. He's beautiful, he said softly. You've done so well, Aisha. Better than I ever could. Aisha placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. We all face the results of our choices, Tund. Yours led you here. Maybe it's not too late to start again, but this time with humility. He nodded, unable to speak. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of his mistakes and the power of her forgiveness. As he walked away, Aisha stood watching him go. She felt no anger, no bitterness, only peace. The woman who once cried on the floor was gone forever. In her place stood a strong, dignified mother and businesswoman whose story was far from over. The wind carried the sweet scent of bread through the air as Malik ran back to her, holding her hand. Aisha smiled down at him and whispered, "You see, my son? Kindness always wins in the end." The sun was setting over the village, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and gold. Aisha stood outside her bakery, wiping her hands on her apron as the last few customers left. The smell of warm bread lingered in the air, and laughter echoed from nearby streets. Life had finally become calm and beautiful for her. She looked inside the bakery and saw Malik stacking trays with the other workers, his small face glowing with joy. He was growing fast, full of energy and kindness, everything she had ever dreamed for him. Just as she turned to close the shop, she saw a familiar figure walking slowly toward her from the road. Her heart skipped a beat. It was Tund. His clothes were plain and dusty, and his face looked tired, older than she remembered. He walked with hesitation, as if unsure whether to come closer or turn back. Aisha felt a strange mix of emotions, memories of pain but also peace because she was no longer afraid. Tund stopped a few steps away. For a long moment neither of them spoke. The wind carried the soft rustle of the trees, and the sound of Malik's laughter floated through the air. Then, in a voice heavy with regret, Tund finally said, "Aisha." She looked at him quietly. "Yes, Tund?" He swallowed hard, his voice trembling. "I was wrong," he said. "I hurt you. I hurt our child. I've spent every day thinking about what I did. Please, forgive me." His eyes were full of tears and his hands shook as he spoke. He looked smaller now, not the proud man who once shouted in anger, but a broken one who finally saw the truth. Aisha didn't move for a while. She studied his face, the same man who had once been her whole world, now standing before her as a stranger. Her heart softened, but her spirit remained firm. In a calm, gentle voice she said, "Tund, I forgave you long ago." He looked up, surprised. "I had to," she continued softly. "If I didn't forgive you, I would have carried that pain forever. But forgiveness doesn't mean I can go back. That life, that woman you once hurt, she doesn't exist anymore. I built something new. I've become someone stronger." Tund's lips trembled. He lowered his head, unable to meet her gaze. "You've become everything I once wished for," he whispered, his voice breaking. "And I lost you because I couldn't see your worth." Aisha gave him a sad smile. "No, Tund. You didn't lose me because of fate. You lost me because of pride. Pride can destroy love faster than hate ever could." He nodded slowly, tears rolling down his cheeks. "I know. Every night I remember that day. I remember your face when I pushed you. I thought being strong meant being in control. I thought respect came from power. But now I see, real strength is kindness. Real power is love." Aisha's eyes softened. She could see the truth in his words, the pain of a man who had finally understood too late. "Maybe life wanted you to learn that," she said. "We all face our lessons. Mine was to rise after being broken. Yours was to lose what you never valued until it was gone." For a while they stood in silence. The air between them carried the weight of years, of love, loss, mistakes, and growth. Then, from inside the bakery, Malik came running toward them, his small arms wide open. "Mama. I baked bread by myself," he said proudly, holding a small loaf in his hands. Aisha smiled and knelt to take it from him. "That's wonderful, my boy," she said, kissing his forehead. Malik looked curiously at Tund, sensing something familiar in his face. Tund's eyes filled with tears again as he watched his son. He knelt slowly, his voice shaking. "You must be Malik," he said softly. "You look just like your mother." Malik smiled shyly. "Mama says I have her courage," he said proudly. Aisha looked at Tund for a moment, then nodded gently. "He does. And he'll grow up knowing love, respect, and kindness, the things we both had to learn the hard way." Tund stood up slowly. He knew it was time to leave. There was nothing left to say that could change the past. "Thank you, Aisha," he whispered, "for forgiving me, and for raising him so well. You're stronger than anyone I've ever known." Aisha smiled faintly. "I had no choice but to be strong," she said. "Sometimes pain breaks us so we can rebuild into something better." He nodded, looking down at the ground. "You turned pain into power," he murmured. She looked at him calmly, her voice steady. "Yes. And you can too if you choose to." Tund took one last look at her, this woman who had once been his wife, now standing tall and peaceful. He saw in her not just forgiveness but freedom. Slowly he turned and began to walk away, his steps heavy but sure. For the first time he wasn't running from his mistakes. He was facing them. Aisha stood watching him until he disappeared down the road. A cool breeze swept through the air, carrying with it the faint scent of bread and hope. Malik tugged at her hand. "Mama, who was that man?" She looked down at him and smiled gently. "Someone who taught me an important lesson," she said softly. "What lesson, Mama?" "That pain can become power, my son. And that love, real love, never hurts. It heals." Malik smiled, though he didn't fully understand. He hugged her tightly, and Aisha wrapped her arms around him, feeling warmth fill her heart. She looked at her bakery, her workers, her child, everything she had built from the ashes of her old life. The sun dipped below the horizon and the village lights began to glow. Aisha whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude, for strength, for peace, for forgiveness. Her heart was free now. As she closed the bakery door for the night, she felt no anger, no sadness. Only peace. Her story had begun with tears, but it ended with strength and love. And as the stars appeared one by one in the night sky, Aisha held Malik close and smiled. The past was gone. The pain was gone. Only her peace remained. The end.